I'm Julia Valladao. I'm the Director of Professional Development here at ITL NCA Networks. And today we're going to talk about the types of litigation advisory work that the Office of the Ministry of the Attorney General does on the Constitutional Law Branch. We have with us today Hera Evans, who is a graduate of Osgoode Hall Law School. She was called to the bar in 2014 and has been a counsel with the Ministry of the Attorney General for over 6 years. As a counsel with the Ministry of the Solicitor General's Legal Services Branch, Hera's practice was primarily litigation focused with an emphasis on litigation before administrative tribunals. Hera joined the Constitutional Law Branch in September of 2019. So thank you so much for joining us. Emily Bala is a graduate of University of Toronto Faculty of Law. She was called to the bar in 2012 after clerking at the Supreme Court of Canada. She completed an LLM at the Harvard Law School and practiced civil litigation at a large firm before joining the Constitutional Law Branch in 2016. Thank you so much for joining us as well. And last but not least, one of the directors here at ITL NCA Networks with me, Priscila Atkinson. She's an LLM candidate at Osgoode Hall Law School and an NCA candidate as well. She completed her LLB at Universidade Federal de Pernambuco in Brazil and was called to the Brazilian bar in 2017. Last year, she was a summer student at the Constitutional Law Branch and will be returning to CLB as an articling student in 2021. I know that time is of the essence today, and we have very limited time to cover a lot of things, so I will go straight to the first question that I will invite all the panelists to give their 2 cents about, but I will start with Hera on this one. So tell us a little bit about how or why you came to work for at the Constitutional Law Branch, which we'll call CLB here for short.
Thanks, Julia. So as Julia said, I'll start us off here. So as you heard, I was initially a lawyer with another branch in the Ontario government. I was a summer student, an articling student, and then became counsel with that branch. And then about a year and a half ago, one of the many wonderful things I would say about government work is that there is an opportunity to do what's called a secondment, and basically to go and try out a job in another area of government, in this case in another legal branch. And you can do that with the security of knowing that you can always go back to your home position. So I was interested in making a bit of a change, and in particular, my practice in litigation at the Solicitor General's office was mostly focused on administrative tribunals. And so I wanted to get a bit more experience litigating in court. And I also was interested in moving from sort of an operational ministry with a lot of like hands-on operational focus, like day-to-day job type advice, to moving to the constitutional realm where you sort of tend to look at like bigger pictures, and also to have a bit more of a breadth of practice, not focused on one particular area of government operations. So I made that move in September of 2019 and have been at CLB since then.
Awesome. Anybody else want to add a little bit about that? Priscila, maybe you have an interesting perspective considering that you started as a summer student.
Yes, so I applied, as everyone that is in this call, I applied for the summer job at CLB. I went through the interview, and while I was successful and I'm going to be back as an articling student, I decided specifically to apply for CLB because of the area. It's a very unique practice, being able to practice constitutional litigations. Not a lot of places that you can do that. So that's one of the reasons I applied. And then I was lucky to see that the office is amazing. Everybody there is like a big family.
That's awesome. Emily?
Oh, in fact, I came a little bit later in my career. I had been practicing law, civil litigation for a few years, but like Priscila, the reason that I applied for the job when it came up is that my favorite subject had always been constitutional law, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to just do that all the time? So that's why I ended up there.
Amazing. All right. what kind of work does the CLB do? Can you provide, and I'm going to choose to direct this question to Emily, if that's okay. Can you provide examples of recent cases that the CLB has been involved in?
Sure, yes. So we do constitutional law, broadly speaking. So we do the Charter, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We do the Human Rights Code, and we do division of powers federalism questions. And we do both litigation and also advice. So in terms of the advice, when ministries are considering new programs or new statutes, new regulations, they may raise constitutional risks. So they come to our branch to get advice on whether there are risks, how serious the risks are, whether there are ways to mitigate them. And we provide advice to all different areas of the government where there are constitutional issues that come up. And then in terms of litigation, there are two kinds of litigation we tend to be involved in. One is when someone sues the government and raises a constitutional claim, we respond to that argument. The other is whenever there's a dispute in Ontario that involves between other parties that aren't the province, but that involves one of the parties raising a constitutional argument, for example, saying, you know, this statute that you're relying on in your claim is unconstitutional. They have to give notice of the constitutional question to the Attorney Generals of Ontario and Canada. And then both the Attorney Generals have a right to intervene if they would like to on the constitutional questions. So when that happens, again, it's our office that does that. There are some exceptions when I say we do constitutional law. For the most part, we don't do constitutional issues that arise in criminal prosecutions, although when I say that, but sometimes we do get involved, but for the most part, we don't do that. We also we don't do Section 35 Aboriginal and treaty rights. There's a specialized separate office, a group within the Crown Law Office Civil that handles those issues. And so in terms of cases that we do cases, both cases that are in the news that you will hear about if you read the newspaper or Twitter or wherever you get your news, and then also cases that, in fact, probably most people never hear about unless it's directly related to their interests or whatever they're doing. So our office is involved in challenges to the Federal Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, the carbon references that you may have heard about. Ontario started one of those references in the Court of Appeal and then went to the Supreme Court of Canada. That was our office that was involved in that. Challenging a federal statute as unconstitutional, which is not the most common type of work we do, but that's a recent case we've been involved in. And then we also do all kinds of constitutional cases wherever they arise. So one of our colleagues recently finished a hearing where a group of individuals argued that it's unconstitutional to prohibit the sale of unpasteurized cow's milk. So that's a very different kind of challenge, and we did that as well. We do litigation in whatever forum that a constitutional question properly arises in. So we go to the Supreme Court of Canada, we go to Divisional Court, we go to Superior Court, we go to the Human Rights Tribunal, we go to the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Appeal Tribunal, we go to Family Court. Wherever the constitutional issue is arising, that's where we go. So we have a lot of opportunity to do advocacy in different courts and administrative tribunals.
That should keep things interesting.
Yes.
All right. Any of the other panelists have anything to add? All right.
So that was very thorough.
All right. About the summer student application. So if, Hera, if you can tell us a little bit about the application process, the interview process at CLB, I think that would be very helpful for everybody who's watching.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the application process. So when we are reviewing applications for summer student positions, we're trying to conduct a holistic assessment. So we're trying to look at, all of your experience and your background and, what has brought you to this point and your interest in the CLB. We are particularly looking for your application to in some way demonstrate either your interest or preferably also your experience in constitutional law or in public law, and both would be ideal. So that's something to keep in mind and to try and make sure is reflected in your application. We're, of course, very interested in your experience with legal research and writing. That's really the bread and butter of any student role, is to be conducting legal research, putting that down in memos, and conveying your thoughts in a concise and clear way. And so we're really interested in making sure, in reviewing your application and seeing that there's some experience there with legal research and writing, because that is predominantly what you'll be doing. In terms of the interview, so we of course review all of the applications we receive, and then we make a determination about who we would like to interview. This year, of course, that will all be virtual. We won't be bringing you into our offices, unfortunately, because we are also not in our offices. And the interview really consists of 3 different types of questions. So the first one is that we'll ask you to prepare something. We'll ask you to prepare to discuss a case. And some years there's sort of different parameters around that. So it might be, a case within the last 5 years, or a Supreme Court case, and that kind of differs from year to year, but you'll be given some parameters about a case that you choose. But you have the opportunity to then choose that case and prepare to present to some extent on that case and the legal issues that arise there. You should choose wisely, we would say, right? You should choose a constitutional case, and preferably one that sort of arises in the areas that we work in. So as Emily said, we don't tend to handle constitutional issues that arise in the course of criminal proceedings or Section 35 Aboriginal rights and treaties issues. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of choosing an appropriate case. But you won't be asked, at random to discuss a sort of a very obscure or, case that you might be unfamiliar with. You'll be given the opportunity to prepare for this. So that's helpful. The second type of questions generally are substantive questions about your, either about the work that the branch does or about your experience. That's obviously something that we're very interested in your interview. So we'll ask you to tell us about your experience and why that makes you a good fit for the student role at CLB. And then we'll ask some behavioral type questions. So these are sort of, common interview questions where we are looking to assess your ability to make good judgments, to have good judgment and to exercise that judgment. So you might be asked things about questions like how you work in a team, or how you dealt with a difficult situation with a coworker, or something like that. It's those types of how you interact in the workplace. And so we're looking for you there to provide some examples based on your experience, either in the workplace or perhaps in an educational setting, about how you dealt with a certain situation and how you would apply that going forward. So that's the interview in a nutshell. And I know we're going to get, I think, into a little bit of more detail and some tips from Priscilla. So I'll leave it there unless there's anything else that anyone wants to add.
Wouldn't it be great if before we applied for any jobs or positions, we had a session like this where we go through what to expect? I think that would be the dream. All right, so on the interview subject, Priscilla, since you've been through it and considering that you have worked there too, do you have any tips on how to prepare for the interview?
Yes, I do have a lot of them. So the first thing is keep calm. It's going to be a very harsh week, not specifically about CLB, but you're going to have a lot of interviews, hopefully, and you're going to get tired. And you just have to remember that just in 3 days, this is going to be over, and you're going to have, hopefully, your dream job. So just keep calm and believe in the process. So a few tips I have specifically about public sector interviews and CLB is the first thing that I did was I looked up on LinkedIn and I stalked as many people as I could, because I wanted to understand who was working in the office, right? I wanted to know which kind of people work there, what were the interests, and if I was lucky enough to be interviewed by one of them, I would know who they were, and maybe I could tailor my questions in the end to that specific person, maybe to make them happy and to make them like me more and lead to more chances of success. And I was lucky. One of my interviewers was one of the people I stalked. So that is the first tip I would give, not just for CLB, but for any interview you're doing in your life, like try to see who are the people that work there. The first thing is I researched a lot what the office does. I was not lucky enough to have this info section for myself. So I had to go on the internet and research what the CLB does, what they don't do, which is more important to understand what they don't do too. So you don't ask questions about things that are publicly available on the internet. Asking questions that are on Google is not a good thing. So you should make sure that you do your research. And also that is going to help you decide which office you want to go to. Because when you're doing your research, you're going to see what the office does, and you're going to see if you like that. Because I feel like the OCIs are not just a one-side thing. Like you also have to pick the office. It's not like they have to pick you. You also have to go somewhere you want to be in the future. Because that's not just a summer job, it's your career. So think wisely about that. So the other thing I did is I practiced a lot for behavioral questions. I opened a camera app on my computer and I recorded myself answering questions, which was weird in the beginning and sounded very awkward. But then I would watch my response and see if it was like too robotic or if it was like genuine or if I was looking too much to the floor. And like those small details do make a difference, I think. And also it helped me to feel like I was doing some prep before. And to not be like the first time that I answer a behavioral question be in the interview. I didn't want that to happen. And for options of questions, you can just go on the internet and there are like a lot of options available. Like just put behavioral questions and you're going to have like 100 to practice. It's not hard to find. And the last thing I did was the tip I have is to prepare to the substantive question that is given, the case that you have to choose. So I treated it as if it was like an assignment at school. All of us have done a lot of assignments during law school. That's actually what we do the most during law school, is to research and write papers. So when I got not just a CLB, but at other interviews that I also had to pick a case or to discuss a case, I treated it as if it was like an exam. So what I did is I did what I usually do, is study for an exam. I don't think now is the time for you to change your tactic. Like whatever you do for school is what you should be doing for the interview, because it has been working. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. So don't change it now. Just keep doing the way you do. What I did is I tried first to pick a case that I liked and also a case that I had an interesting perspective on. I didn't want to sound boring, so I picked something that I could disagree with. I didn't want to agree with the case that I picked. I wanted to make sure it was something that I didn't like. So I picked the case that I could disagree with and give this unique perspective. And also I tried to research as many specific substantive areas, substantive topics in that case as I could, so I could have enough topics to talk about. I did not end up covering it all because there was no time, but at least if there was time, I wouldn't be like in an awkward silence and I would have things to talk about. Something else I did, which was I also recorded myself explaining it, because that's something I like. When I'm studying to school, I like talking out loud and practicing the answers and the questions. So I recorded myself and I also had it on my phone and I would listen whenever I was busy. So I'd listen the bus ride or, well, now we're in COVID, so we're always at home. We're not really busy, but like whenever I was like cooking food, I would have just like myself playing the answer of whatever I was going to say. And that really helped me to make it more natural and not something like memorized. And yeah, so that's what I have to say. And my last tip, which is I think the most important, is try to have fun. I know it's a weird thing to say that like you should be having fun in an interview, like is she crazy? But no, like my best interviews were the ones that I didn't notice time passing. And that in the end I was like, oh my God, really? Like, is it over? And like I was so happy on them. Like at the CLB one, it was like so fun. Like Josh Hunter was the person that interviewed me. And like he asked me 1,000 questions, and please expect a lot of questions and to be interrupted all the time. But in the end of it, I felt like it wasn't an interview. And that's how you should try to do it yourself. Like just try to have fun.
Before we get more input from anybody else who wants to add, I would like to say that the interview tips that Priscila gave, the general ones, not specific to CLB, of course, you can apply to every single job search that you're doing. We recently did an info session on OCI interviews as well, and a lot of those tips were mentioned by the recruiters there. You know, with a career in recruitment, I can tell you that recording yourself sounds weird, but it's exactly what you should be doing to get comfortable talking about it later, for example. So great tips, Priscilla. Thank you so much. Any of the other panelists have anything to add other than getting to know what Priscilla did to work with you guys?
I'm so impressed by your preparation. I have to say that does all sound amazing. I realized I forgot a couple of like administrative sort of things that I should say. So I'll just say those quickly and then see if Emily has anything to add. So first of all, one thing you should expect during a government interview is that unfortunately, we probably won't be making a lot of eye contact with you. It's because we have to be taking notes. So the interviews are scored. Each question is worth a certain number of points. So we'll be sort of frantically, taking notes either by hand or typing to make sure that we get down everything you say so that we can give you the points that your excellent answers have earned you. So you shouldn't feel alarmed or sort of put off when that happens. We do try and look up at you from time to time, but we are focused on getting down all the information you're saying. On the scoring part, you should pay attention to the number of points that each question is worth, because that's going to help guide your answer a little bit. So a 3-point question, you can expect to try and make those points quickly and then move on. But if a question is worth 20 points, then obviously you're going to spend more time on that. Right? So that allows you to kind of gauge the detail that will be needed for your answer. And then the last things are, you are permitted to have your CV and resume in front of you. Obviously, we could police that a little bit more in person, and virtually we will have to use an honor system, I suppose, but that's totally permitted. And then I also wanted to say that if you require any accommodation pursuant to the Human Rights Code, you should absolutely let our office know about your needs, and we can work with you on that front.
Terrific. All right. Emily, anything to add?
No, I mean, Priscilla, that's an amazing amount of preparation. No wonder you were obviously very successful in your interview. I think there's lots of different ways to prepare. And I promise there's no bonus hidden points for having looked at counsel on LinkedIn and being able to ask them personal questions. I've seen excellent interviews where a student didn't know that they were talking about a case that in fact the lawyer that was interviewing them was involved in. That's not a requirement of the interview. So, the advice was excellent, but we promise you don't need to personally investigate each lawyer.
Well, now that everybody did terrific on their interviews and everybody is working at CLB, what does the summer student get to do when they get there? What are the kind of works and, tasks and all of that students get to do at CLB?
So I can answer that first, and then I bet Priscilla will have, in fact, her own more concrete and specific answer that may be of more interest to you. But our goal and our interest is in getting students involved in basically every possible stage of a file, both because that I think is the best learning experience for you to see as much of a file as possible, and because it's very helpful for us to have students who are knowledgeable about the file, who are learning as they go, picking up experience that when we hope they return for articles will serve them and us very well. So, whether that's helping us with the initial analysis of a pleading or a notice of constitutional question when it comes in, doing research memos about different arguments we might do if they're new arguments, coming with us to help interview potential witnesses, preparing affidavits, finalizing affidavits, certainly lots of work on factums. If we do cross-examinations, coming with us and helping us prepare for cross-examinations. If there's a hearing going on. So there's generally, the thing about a summer that's sometimes more difficult is there's less court happening often in the summer than in an articling term. So I think there's just fewer opportunities to go to court, although Priscilla can tell you more about her experience. Certainly, if you've been working on a file and there is a hearing, the practice is that you will get to come to it. And often, I think when counsel are going to court on something and they haven't had a student involved, they email the students and say, I'm going to court on this. Does someone want to come and see it? Because even just watching something can be a great way to learn something new about something that maybe you didn't know anything about before. So we really do try and get students involved, and it is really helpful to us. Our students are typically excellent, and we really value their contributions. And when we do have, I think this is probably more common in articling, when we do have sort of longer proceedings going on, they can get really, really closely involved and really play a key role in supporting like the trial team or whatever's going on. Normally we tell students that we anticipate in an ordinary year that all of our articling students will have the opportunity to assist on a file that goes to the Supreme Court of Canada, because we do normally do a fair number of interventions in the Supreme Court. We can't guarantee that because we never know in a given year what will happen. And also it's obviously very different when hearings happen by Zoom, and the going to the Supreme Court of Canada means, you know, watching the Zoom link, but that is our ordinary practice, and that's a neat opportunity that I think in a lot of litigation articling positions you don't necessarily get to do. And then Priscilla, I'm sure you have more specific, mindful of solicitor-client privilege, you probably have a more specific recount of your own experience this past summer.
Priscilla, before you start, I would like to remind everyone that we are welcoming questions. So we will open the floor for questions. If you want to just type them on the Q&A, we'll do our best to address most, if not all of them.
And I've received one already from someone here that I promise we will answer when we get to the questions part.
Perfect.
Okay, so Emily, everything she says like 100% true. And the one thing that is the best is like, I feel like students there, like they're very included, you know, like I felt like I was really part of the office and that I was really valued. I wasn't just like someone that was going to be there for 4 months and then like go away. So I feel like there is a real effort to care about our professional development, to make sure that we learn and to make sure that we're becoming well-rounded professionals. So that's one of the things I loved the most about CLB, that I was actually part of the team, I would say. So the work that I did during the summer was very diverse, even though it was like 4 months. So you have to be mindful that in 4 months you can't do a lot because it's a limited time. And also it's a time of the year that the courts are a little bit slower. So you might not have a lot of opportunities to like attend to hearings, for example. So you just have to be mindful of that. But counsel will do their best to give all the tasks that you need to make sure that you like CLB and that you want to return to articling, and that you're also getting better in practice and becoming a better litigator. So during the 4 months that I was there, I worked on files related to Section 2B, to Section 15, equality. I also helped in research that was to the draft of a bill. So I did also work not on litigation, I also worked in an advisory capacity. And it was very interesting because it was something totally different from anything I have ever done in my life. And counsel trusted me with that. And I helped with even like a new proposition of how the bill should be drafted. So that's something that usually I think summer students wouldn't be able to do in other offices. And at CLB, I was able to do, and I was very happy with that. In terms of courts, I worked in a lot of levels of court, not the Supreme Court of Canada, but I worked on appellate level, also at the SCJ, at various tribunals. So I could see a lot of different areas and also different levels of the court, and that was very valuable for me during this short period of 4 months. Something else that I could do was I worked on cross-examinations. I could do the research for the cross-examination, also attend the cross-examination hearing, and be helping counsel with like what is the best approach we can take, or just learning how to get things done. It was something very valuable of that experience. I also could attend 2 hearings. I was lucky that the files that I was assigned to, they were very active and they were like super hectic, and we had a lot of meetings with other counsels as well, other counsels of other branches of the government. I could meet people from the labor branch of the government, and they're like super friendly. So it was a good experience, and I got to do a lot of things. And something else that I want to mention that it's not really related to work, but I also could be involved in committees in the office. Like I could do something outside of this formal relationship of lawyers. I could also be more like in the same level, I would say, and do like work as not as a summer student, but also as their like the teammate, and like help in other areas like in inclusion and diversity, or in education, or in a social committee. So that is something unique that I think we are able as students to be a part of. And something else is that in CLB, I feel like you're never going to be bored because the work is extremely diverse. Like in the morning, one time I could be working with employment law, and then in the afternoon I would be reading insurance, and finishing up my day, I would be reading like equality rights. So it's like, you feel like you get to learn a bit of everything, because constitutional law touches upon all the areas of law, as we all know. So it's like, it's never boring. That's the one thing also about the work there. And yeah, so that's, I think, what I have to add, because Emily did give a lot of good tips. And the other thing is that the librarians do an amazing job in the beginning of the summer job. And I know it's not related to the kind of work you do at CLB, but you do get a lot of training in the beginning, and it's like very valuable, not just for a summer job, but for the rest of your career. Like, they taught me things on Westlaw and queer law that I had no idea existed. So I think it's very, like, if you do get picked at CLB or any other branch of the government, we'll have that training, and like make sure you attend to all of them, because it was like the best thing of my summer, outside from working with amazing counsel at CLB.
The only other thing I should have mentioned that I didn't was that, of course, for articling students, we have principles, which is required by the Law Society, but is also a rule that will help make sure that the students are getting sort of not too much work, not too little work. If there's a particular area that they want, that they're really interested in, their principal can help them make sure they get an opportunity to work on it if there's something happening. So that's during articling, but during the summer, every summer student also has a mentor. And like, I hope Priscilla would agree, in general, all of the lawyers in the office are pretty happy to work collaboratively with everyone, including students, so are happy to hear from a student if they have a question or a problem or an interest. But there is someone who's there who, like, a specific part of their job is to make sure, you know, is Priscilla doing okay? Is she getting the work that she needs? Is she getting the support that she needs to have a successful summer? So I hope Priscilla would agree. I don't even remember who her mentor was, but I think that's a nice part of our the ways we try and support summer students.
Yes, and also the mentor also asks you areas of interest, and they might connect you with a lawyer, even though it's not articling. It's harder because it's just a 4-month period, so it's harder for you to actually, if you like a specific area of law, you have to be very lucky that it's available in a 4-month window. But it's possible, and the mentors are a huge help. I agree with Emily.
Sounds great. Emily, you said you had a question from the audience.
Yes, I think Richard has sent me a question and asked me, sorry, I have it here. What is the name of the cow's milk matter? So the cow's milk matter that my coworker argued, the decision isn't out yet, so there's no decision you can look up, but Priscilla's nodding. I don't know if maybe she was involved in the case, but it was called AFLEC. A challenge to the provisions around unpasteurized milk. So there's no decision yet.
I don't believe we have other questions from the audience. So if you guys are still typing, I'll give you a couple.
One question.
I have one as well, actually.
Okay.
So why don't you go ahead, Priscilla, and then we'll go to mine.
So the question was, most summer students and interns are given only legal research work. Personally, I had to research precedents and case laws as an intern. But you mentioned that you could draft documents as well. How did this work? And did your mentor proofread or guide you? So yes, I had the opportunity to, I forgot to mention that when I was talking, to draft a factin, parts of a factin, actually not the full factin, in one case. In the other case, I drafted the full factin. I also had the opportunity to draft research memos, which is connected to research, but sometimes the research memos do lead to, like, counsel sometimes use that research memo in a factin. So it's not like, you might not be drafting the actual document in the end, but parts of your research might be used there. And how it worked was, I was given a question or a specific task, like write this factin. I would research, I would put it together, draft the full document. Then the lawyer that was in charge of this file would review it, not my mentor. The mentor is more like a general help to make sure that you were doing okay and that you're having all your files are going well, that you don't have a problem. If you need assistance, you know who to go to. but you work closely to each lawyer that is like in charge of that file. And that person is going to give you feedback, is going to tell you how to get better, or it's just going to tell you, good job, and then you move on to your next text. I think that was the question, yeah.
Hera, you said you had one as well.
Yes. So I was asked, has your office received any Section 6 mobility rights challenges from the pandemic restrictions? Which is a very interesting question. I don't think that we have, and perhaps that's because, to my knowledge, there hasn't been in Ontario, at least, like, so as distinct from like the maritime provinces, for example, which had restrictions on who could sort of enter those provinces during various parts of the pandemic. I'm not actually sure if those are still in place. So Ontario, to my knowledge, didn't take that approach, and I'm not aware of any specific Section 6 challenges. However, I would say we have certainly been involved. We've had a very busy year due to the pandemic and due to lots of advisory work and some litigation that has come out of the public health response to the pandemic. I think those have tended to focus on more Section 7 considerations, although that's not necessarily the case across the board. Our office did just before Christmas, defend against an injunction from a church seeking to challenge the restrictions that recently were put into place again for religious gatherings. So that's an area that comes to mind in terms of the things that have arisen from the pandemic. But it has kept us quite busy in a number of different areas, although I don't think Section 6 is one of those that we shall see. Unfortunately, there's probably more to come on that front.
All right.
I have one more question. I think that came just to me. Sorry, that is a follow-up. Sorry, I didn't spell the name of the case about unpasteurized milk. I believe it's AFFLECK. Again, there's no reported decision yet. So I should have
Affleck, like the actor Ben Affleck,
like Ben Affleck, but not Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
I should have picked a case where there's a reported decision that I could have directed you to. I will do that next time.
We're getting more questions on the general chat, and I will again do my best to go through them. We kind of covered this already, but if you could brush up on the qualities that you usually expect from a summer student, what is it that really sparks an interest in one candidate versus the other, I guess?
I can answer that. I think so. We look for students who are going to be really strong and successful and happy CLB summer students. So strong legal research skills, strong writing skills, strong advocacy skills, interest in those things, interest in constitutional law, interest in public law, interest in public service, all of those things really. Your ability to analyze legal issues. When there's things on your resume and in your answers to your questions that can demonstrate those things, those are really the qualities we look for. We also look for the ability to, interest in an ability to work hard, to manage short timelines, because sometimes the stuff we do is very time sensitive. To Priscilla's nodding, she had a very busy summer. To manage competing deadlines, all of the things that you might think of when you think of, what's a busy litigation practice, what skills do you need for that? Those are the kinds of things we look for. I don't know if there's anything Hera or Priscilla would add.
I think the only thing I'll add is that, we do a specific type of work. And so we are, I think I've mentioned this earlier, but we are really looking for you to demonstrate to us that you have a keen interest in constitutional and public law. If that interest has manifested in your previous experience, then you want to make sure to draw that out, because those are qualities we're looking for.
And on that note, for students who don't have a previous constitutional law experience, we have a question about how can those applicants make their application stand out, or even if they don't have any experience working with the government. Hera,
So I think that's very sure. I'll start, and then anyone else can weigh in. I think that's very doable. You know, we do, as I said, try and conduct a holistic assessment, and we recognize that not everyone has had those opportunities. So that's where the interest factor comes in as well. So, you know, it's not necessarily expected that you have been able to work in an office working on constitutional law issues exclusively in the past, right? Like that's not a disqualifying factor by any means. But I think what we're looking for in those circumstances where you might have more limited experience is what have you done that can show us that you're really interested in this area. So as part of your education, your law school or other education, have you been involved in you know, how did you write your thesis on some sort of constitutional law issue for a master's or an undergraduate degree? Were you involved in any, you know, clubs or extracurricular activities as part of law school or other studies? Have you volunteered? Have you done an internship or anything else of that nature? So I think those kinds of things can, or even you can demonstrate it through the courses that you've taken, right? Have you, when you had the chance, you know, you've done electives that focused on areas of constitutional or public law. So I think those are a few ways that a few things that could be highlighted when you haven't necessarily had, as most people truly haven't, you know, the opportunity to work exclusively or even somewhat in constitutional law before.
And on that note, let's say the summer student does impress the CLB during that course of that summer job. Do they have to wait, you know, for the following year's recruit to apply for articling? Do they automatically get an articling offer? How does that work? Sorry, I'm the moderator. Okay. I should choose who's going to answer that question. Emily, if you want to answer that, it's kind of open floor.
Sorry, I just heard my kids speaking. I think your question though was what
if the summer student impresses
yes.
the CLB, can they get an offer for articling, or do they need to wait?
So that's very important, and we should have mentioned that. Thank you for asking. So in the ordinary course during the summer, all of our summer students end up being offered positions for articling. And so they know when their summer finishes that they'll be coming back. They have to let us know in some amount of time. I think maybe it's prescribed by the Law Society, but it may not be. They let us know what their decision is so that if for some reason they're not coming back, we can make sure that we hire another articling student. Mm-hmm. For the most part, our students, since I've been there, have always come back with the exception of quite a large number of our students end up doing a clerking with a court for their articles. I think there's a big overlap between students who want to do constitutional litigation and students who are interested in clerking. So that's, in my time, I think that's the only reason students haven't come back from summering to articling. It's not, I guess, not technically guaranteed because you never know what happens, but it's always happened that unless students tell us, no, I'm going to go somewhere else for my articles, I've already decided, that we've offered them spots for their articles.
All right.
And for example, in Priscila's year, they all three of her, Priscila and her two colleagues are coming back to article with us, and we're very excited to have them.
Amazing. The next question is relevant to ITLs. We have Catherine Felix is asking, some of us have been involved in constitutional issues in external jurisdictions. What is your opinion on these transferable skills? And
so I think oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I think that's a great question. I bet there's absolutely transferable skills. You know, obviously the constitutions of different countries are different, but if you have advisory experience or litigation experience in other jurisdictions, the only thing to know is that you'll want to make sure you can explain to the interview panel and in your cover letter, you know, you may have to spell out more than you would in another jurisdiction exactly what it is you've worked on, but I think those skills can be very valuable and very transferable and can absolutely make a strong candidate, can be part of a really successful application.
Perfect. Hera, any thoughts to add there?
No, I don't think so. I agree. I think that would absolutely be really relevant experience, and certainly that would go to the interest piece as well, right? If you've worked on these issues in another jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's something I highlighted on my cover letter when I applied. I worked at 2 courts in Brazil as a clerk, and I did put that on my cover letter, and also my interview it came up. So I could explain the work I did there, and then if they could understand what I was doing, because just like by putting, I worked in that specific court in Brazil or in whatever jurisdiction, they will not know what you actually did. So that will come up in an interview, and you have to be ready to talk about it. But it's for sure something they're interested to know about. And also something that is, I think, outside of CLB and like being picked to the office, something they want to know for the personal interest too, like curiosity. So that'll be a fun thing to talk about in an interview.
Okay. Anything else? Did anybody else get any questions directly on their chat box?
I don't have any direct ones to me, but I think there are a couple more in the main chat. I'll try and take one of them. One is the difference between the Department of Justice of yes. Canada, I assume, and CLB, and sort of any overlap in the work there. I think that, so first of all, I haven't worked for the DOJ, so I can't speak for personal experience, but certainly the Government of Canada would also deal with, similar constitutional issues, litigation, and providing advice. I believe that the DOJ is structured differently in terms of, I think they have separate offices that do advisory versus litigation work. So I think that is maybe one of the differences, in that at CLB we both provide advice and legal opinions as well as litigate constitutional issues when they come up. But I don't sort of take my word for that, because I'm not 100% sure. But it's certainly we are involved in cases where the Attorney General of Canada is also involved in the case. Maybe one of us is an intervener. And one of us is defending the case. And so similar issues, I assume, would come up and be dealt with by Canada as well. But for example, in the division of powers realm, I think that work will differ if you're working for a province versus the federal government, because of course there are different areas of legislative responsibility, and provinces and the federal government might take a different approach to those division of powers issues, right? Provinces always want to say that they are, co-equal, and that their spheres are just as important, and they have just as much power in those respective spheres. So that's an area where it might differ, but I don't have any direct experience there, but I think probably you're right that there is some overlap in the type of work that would be done on constitutional issues at DOJ versus at CLB for the province of Ontario.
I did get one question privately from me. So this person asked, if I'm finishing a full-time LLM and having a gap year between the summer job and the articling, should I mention that in an interview and explain that it's fine for me to wait for that gap? So I don't know what Hera and Emily can say about that, but I have a gap of 6 months, and that was not an issue. Like, I think we are all adults and we can control like our schedule when we're going to article, when we're going to summer, as long as we can fulfill the LSO deadlines and all the requirements of the LSO. But maybe they can give some insight about that.
I'm happy to go, or I don't know if you have thoughts, Emily. I was just going to say, I think that's totally right. I think really what we're looking for is just to make sure that you are eligible, according to the LSO requirements for either a summer student position or articling. I think there are more requirements around that. So timing wise, I don't think there are any concerns from the perspective of our office, when you finished an LLM or a particular degree, again, as long as you're eligible for the position you're applying for at the time, that you would be in that position. I think this sort of relates, so I'm going to also address a question about whether a summer student would be able to start their articles right after the summer. I see that in the chat. So, or having to wait until the following year. So as I understand this question, I think it's, so for example, if you were to be a summer student this year in 2021, starting in May and ending in August, the question is whether you could then begin articling in August of 2021. And I think the answer to that is no, because the way our student program works is that we hire for certain years. So when we hire for summer 2021 students, and then make articling offers to those students, we are making them an articling offer for beginning in 2022, because we already have a batch of students, Priscila being one of them, who have previously summered or maybe have not, but who have been hired to begin their articles in August of 2021. So while I'm not sure there's any bar to doing that from a law society perspective, I'm not sure about that. It's not the way that our office functions, just because of the sort of hiring cycles and how that process works.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to see the next question, which may be exactly what you were doing.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
are paralegals considered to work at CLB, or is it primarily lawyers? So there's probably two parts to that question. One is we do have a law clerk who works in our office. There's about 20 lawyers and then one law clerk and some other business professionals. If the question is about will we hire paralegals through the summer student process, the answer is we're only hiring summer law students through that process. Like I think the law clerk hiring within the ministry is through a totally different process. I'm not sure if that was part of the question or not.
I believe that was also my understanding of the question. Okay. So
yeah, so if to apply through the summer student process, you have to be eligible under the Law Society's rules for that. I don't know whether there are. I think there's no reason that someone who is also a paralegal couldn't apply to be a summer student, but I don't know whether that applies to that question. You have to be eligible to be a summer student to apply to be a summer law student.
All right, I think we are approaching the hour. I know that some of us have meetings starting at 1 sharp. So unless there's anything else the panelists would like to add, I will actually open the floor to the three of you if you want to add anything, any last remarks.
I would just say thank you all very much for your interest and for your excellent questions, and we're pleased to be able to speak to you today. And as well, I think Julia has our contact information, or if she doesn't, we're happy to provide it, and you can certainly reach out to us if you have any other questions at another time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, the three of you, and all of you who joined us with questions and being interested in the info session. We are recording this, so it will be available later on our website, itln.ca. Feel free to reach out to any of the directors, particularly if you have any questions for me about professional development. I am happy to answer any questions that you have. And hopefully we will meet again soon on another info session about a different branch or a different career path. Thank you so much, y'all. Have a great day.